Hi everybody, it's Dark Guardsman. We're back after a couple days of absence here. So the progress that's been made is I did end up actually working on the silo door some more. I didn't implement the UV maps just yet, so that was the last video we were working on, was working on mapping the UVs for the silo doors. I got the bottom half mostly finished. Still got a little bit of work left on that one. Still got to do the top as well. Got to texture them, then implement them. But there wasn't work continued on the silo doors themselves. I basically more or less completely JSON-fied the doors. Now I can't really show that off because visually it looks about the same, but the general concept is that you can specify a JSON file. The JSON file will basically go, hey, I have a new door to add to ICBM. The door will then be loaded up by ICBM. It'll load up with whatever mod it's loading up, so any mod can actually add a door to it, or any content pack basically can do it. So with that, you can specify the door, the multi-block, the size, the height, so you can do the width and height. So for those who remember, the door is basically 3x3. Unfortunately, I don't have ICBM loaded, so I'll be showing that off right now. So you can do 3x3, but you can also then specify 5x5, 6x6, or actually it has to be odd numbers, so 7x7. But then you can say it like it's 2 blocks tall, and it would fill the multi-block out automatically, do all the render bounds automatically for you, so you don't have to worry about that. The only thing you really have to specify is how big the multi-block is and kind of what it should render like. So if you fully remember, we actually had a rendering system for that. But that's not exactly what I want to do with this video though, is talk about that. That was just some news update for those who were expecting a video on the silo door after the last video. Eventually we'll get back to doing that here. But this week, the goal is to work on Atomic Science more. After all, the plan is to get this updated by the end of the month to a point where you can use the mod. Now the mod is actually already up on Curse, and I went ahead and put it up here, that way I can reserve the name. I actually did have to talk to Curse staff because somebody went and grabbed the name and was holding on to it, but the project never got approved, so that the name was never actually used. So they went ahead and released that name for me. That's why there's a BBM actually in front of that. I probably will remove that later since it's not really needed. But the project is up there. The mod is experimental, so it's saying experimental here actually doesn't mean experimental. The mod doesn't have like any content whatsoever. So the content that is currently in the mod right now is the content you guys will see up there. Basically some basic blocks, armor, radioactive items. Radiation system isn't there, material system isn't there, so that's the reason why it was uploaded, so people can toy around with that and play around and see how that works. The page itself does actually talk about the mod is detailed. I'm still going to come through and clean it up, but it does talk about the radiation system, does talk about the radioactive material system, how the reactors will eventually work. The reactors are going to be highly simplified. I'm going to keep them exactly how they were in the older version. I am not going to use some of Cal Clubby's multi-block systems. And before somebody panics and go, oh no, you're not staying true to the old version. No, he had some elaborate code that was just unnecessary on top of some of the reactors. For example, one of the features I'm actually going to show off here, the reactor core was actually a multi-block structure. Didn't really actually need to be a multi-block structure because it didn't actually do anything. The only thing the multi-block structure kind of did was make fluid handling just a little easier, but that's not something we really need to worry about. I can make the code work in such a way that the fluid handling is simplistic without the need for multi-blocks. Anyways, also, the page also does talk about some frequently asked questions. It does actually note if you guys want to use the radiation system for post-apocalyptic world, it's not recommended. I will be making a mod that is specifically designed for post-apocalyptic world at a future date, so that way you guys can have this radiation system work, and that's without actually having the overhead of all the extra RAM usage of the memory, which we did talk about in the video. This actually also notes that. I'll probably end up adding more links to that, various other things, etc., etc. You guys can read through this. The links up here, basically Atomic Science after the project thing. You guys can find it. It's not too hard. But what I do want to show off is the improvements I made to the radiation system. Now, the plan with the radiation system is, after all, to make this somewhat realistic. Part of making this realistic is the ability for items and blocks to actually generate radiation. Let me go ahead and set the time of day. So, from previous videos, for those who haven't seen it, the radiation system works by pretty much tracking material in the world. You set the material value in the world, it will then distribute radiation based on how much material you have. This is designed so that way if a reactor explodes, it'll spew radioactive material everywhere, and you'll have radiation in the area, or if you kind of dump toxic waste or spill items on the ground, etc., etc. But part of the need for this for the system is to be able to also track anything. Not just what data value we store in the map, but the ability to also track items. Now I have an item here. As you can notice, I'm not actually getting any radiation. I haven't finished the system completely. There's quite a few bits I still have to work on. Particularly, I need to make it scan the player's inventory and actually start producing radiation again. People who saw the previous videos will know that this used to actually produce radiation and affect you while you were holding it. I removed that system to implement a newer system that's much nicer, and the reason for doing that is I want the radiation not to just produce towards the player holding the item. I want that radiation to go off the player in all directions. So that way if somebody's standing next to you with a radioactive rod in their hand, it will actually poison you if you're not wearing a radiation suit. But the part that does work is I can toss this item and it will start producing radiation. So you can see up there we got a 0.2 rim, and if we pick that up, it'll go back to 0. Now this is stack based, so that way when you actually drop a stack, so we drop a half a stack here, we get 14 rims. Now if we drop another stack over here, it'll actually go even higher. And as I change direction and orientation, the radiation does modify. Now this is not being calculated in real time, so this radiation value is statically cached. What it actually will do is it will keep track of this item in the world and go, okay, did the item change? Did your radiation value change? Did your position change? Did any property about you change? If you did change, we then update the radiation cache system. So when I pick this back up, this will actually remove that cache value. That does have a little bit of a lingered delay just because the thread does take a bit of time to run. The thread is not the most speedy thing in the world. The cool thing is that the thread does run really efficiently in regards to performance. For the particular thing is that when I was working on the system a couple days ago, when I split off the radiation material system and the radiation exposure system, I made a mistake, and the exposure system was actually setting values in the material system. And this is actually a bad thing because how the exposure system works is it keeps track of any change to any material value in the world. So it setting the material value was then triggering the exposure system to go back and recycle its value, which was then causing more values to change in the world, and vice versa. This led to actually a ton of values being dumped in the thread. The thread ended up processing somewhere around 365,000 entries, and it did this without lagging the world out. Frame rate stayed steady, ticks per second stayed steady, CPU didn't max out. It was really good, worked really, really well. But that data did save to the world, so every time that world reloaded and everything else, it actually reprocesses again. It took about 10 minutes to process 365,000 entries. After all, I did say it's not the fastest thing in the world. I'm actually probably going to implement a few more threads and let people kind of customize that. There's definitely some performance improvements I'm going to do that to make that actually run faster, including things like sorting, merging, stuff like that. So if you have multiple entries actually overlapping, that stuff. But at least this system does work, and I can just kind of throw these everywhere. And this will actually update, and as I move around, it'll actually do things. It does take a few seconds to actually finish loading, because after all, I can actually show you how this does work. This actually will update radiation, and it actually will pick the spot and go, okay, we have 40 material, which is what these rods. These rods are actually on a really low material value. The rods will not poison you very quickly because, one, they're partially shielded, so that way they actually are absorbing some of that radiation, so it's not getting out. What radiation is getting out is very minor. So you see what's it setting the 1, 2, 1, 2. So we actually won't get radiation until we get really close to these rods, but you can see as I move around before actually picking these up, it will actually hit me with a little bit of radiation. And this will work for a little bit of everything. So the plan is this will be on all items. This will be on all entities. So if you have, for example, say the horse over there got exposed to radioactive material. So it actually got hit by the material, not the radiation. To keep those two things separate, the radiation hurts you, but the material is just an object that generates radiation, which then hurts you. So say the horse got generated with radioactive material, and it would actually generate radiation as it walked around. This is actually planned, by the way, for the zombies and the skeletons. They will actually generate radiation off of them in some cases, because they'll pick it up, although both will be kind of somewhat immune to radiation. The skeleton's going to be almost completely immune, and the zombie will be partially immune, so you won't take damage very quickly. But that's about it I have to show you. Oh, I do have one last thing to show if it doesn't actually crash here, is the actual reactor. This is unfinished, but it does kind of work. These are the original models. It does have some Z-fighting issues. I got to fix those. This is just a leftover issue with the older models. It wasn't as big of a problem in like 1.5.2 when these models were made, and it kind of became more of an issue. But these are actually multi-block. They're actually designed to stack. Interaction code does work with them, although the rendering is not exactly finished. There actually should be a rod rendering in the middle, and it's actually not rendering at the moment. But these will actually run. They should be generating radiation right now, but the system is not actually set up to detect the radiation running just yet. So I'll come back and show those off a bit later and see you guys with more content and videos.